Are you ready for some more things to learn today?
Yes.
Excellent. So very briefly, we talked the first day about how a product is created and what the corporations need to do in order to market this product in many, many countries. Then yesterday, we learned about the content. Content is very important. And because content is so much multiplying today, there's an explosion of digital content. We now have to start using machine translation to be able to deal with the localization of this massive amount of content available. And as part of the machine translation, as you all know, it is never perfect. So I'm going to leave to other experts the evaluation of machine translation and all the other details of machine translation. But today, we're going to speak about post-editing. Now, post-editing is a linguistic task that happens after the machine has given us the translation. And as we know, there are some language pairs that are very, very good, and the output that comes out from machine translation is excellent. And there are some languages and some subjects that what comes out as an output is so terrible that it's not even worth doing it. So depending on the language pair and the subject, there may be a good quality or a not so good quality. So what we are doing here today is learning how to take that output and make it better, which is why we call it machine translation post-editing. And we're going to go in many details, but we're going to start from the general editing concepts from a linguistic aspect. Because when we do editing of our translation, we just do one type of editing amongst many types of editings that are there available for language. And we're going to go through some of them so we can understand exactly where post-editing is related to the rest of the editing ideas and concepts.
今天呢 J 给大家主要讲的就是译后编辑。译后编辑呢，其实更多的是跟语言相关的。然后呢，最开始的时候他会给大家讲一下，其实除了咱们语言的 editing 之外呢，有很多其他的 editing， 比如说咱们会有格式的编辑，比如说咱们在处理设计的时候常见的，比如 windows and orphans， 孤行和orphans， 就是每段落的就是段落的第一句话分在另外一页上，这个叫 orphan。然后最后一行分在下一个页面上，这个叫 widow。孤行和寡行就是类似这样的会有很多。它首先会给大家进行一个宏观的讲解，然后呢，咱们做一些机器翻译之后的这个 editing。
The second section we're going to talk today is going to be about the skills of editors, and we're going to compare them to the skills of translators and to the skills of editors of the same language. For example, an author writes something in Chinese and another Chinese edits that. Let's say it's an article for publication in a newspaper. So we're going to see the different skill sets that are required to do different tasks within our language industry.
第二部分呢，主要是因为译员和编辑审校之间所需的技巧是不一样的。然后这一回主要给大家讲一讲，作为一名译员，你需要具备的哪些基本的素质。 作为一名编辑者，你需要的基本素质是哪些？
Now, post-editing is a very recent task that has been added to our list of things to do. And because machine translation has become a lot more successful, giving us more successful outputs recently with the onset of neural machine translation. So since the outputs have become better, now we're asked more and more to do post-editing. So it's a very, very recent task. And because of that, there isn't much training available. So I'm going to go through very quickly some information from some universities that we have in the West that do masters on translation and how they deal with post-editing. And I'm also going to give you a couple of examples of commercial training packages that exist on the internet for you to take a look at.
第三个部分呢，因为大家知道 NMT 就是神经翻译呢，也是最近2-3年的事情，所以 MTPE 这个课程设置还是比较新的，目前没有任何一个学校是专门开设了 MTPE 这么一门课。然后呢 ，J 会把在欧洲几所高校开设相关的就是部分课程的学校的课程设置，再给大家说一下。另外一个呢，还有一些商业公司进行大量的 MTPE 的一个就是工作，也会给大家大概讲一下。
The last section is going to be on training, on a survey that is being done recently and is continuously being done on the attitudes of freelancers on post-editing. That's an important consideration because attitudes change. So the more we do post-editing, the more this will change. But I will also mention a couple of things that post-editing is different dependent on what machine translation type we have used. So if we use rules-based machine translation, the outputs are going to be different than if we use statistical. And of course now, recently that we have the neural machine translation, the outputs are much better, but different. Therefore, there have been many academic studies that have started all the way back 15-20 years ago. These studies, of course, are based on the initial machine translation models, which was at the time rules-based. Then, when statistical machine translation came out, there were some other academic studies. And finally now, we're having a proliferation, an explosion of more academic studies being done right now as we speak on neural machine translation. Now, all of these are very important, but the point that I want to make, and I want this to be very clear, is that it is a moving target. The sooner we create academic studies and conclusions and articles, technology has already moved to the next stage. So we need to start all over again. That is why perhaps surveys are very good, because we can then find what the real life people are doing and what's important to them.
第三部分呢，这会简要给大家讲一下对于机器翻译和译后编辑的学术的一些研究。因为学术研究呢，肯定是因为技术变化很快，学术研究呢都是会落后于这个科技发展的。所以呢，他会给大家讲一个调查，一个调查可以第一时间呢把相关的信息搜集起来。
So, do you have any questions? Okay, so let's start.
因为今天呢更多的是关于译后编辑，这不是我的专长。刚好呢有一个我在蒙特雷高班的学姐 Rory 在这个地方，她是一个非常知名的翻译教师，也译后编辑做得非常好。有什么问题呢？她会跟大家进行一些解释。Rory，给大家打个招呼。
Thank you so much. Yes. So before we speak about post-editing, let's speak a little bit about editing. So there are different types of editing, and there are different types of documents that some are better, some types of editing are better than others. So we have copy editing and we have proofreading. So let's take a very quick look at their differences. When do you copy edit and when do you proofread? And what exactly is it? And what is it from these two examples or these two tasks that is similar? So copy editing is done on a Word document. So you can make changes, you can make drastic changes. You can delete words, you can do track changes to show what it is. However, proofreading is done either on a PDF, on a hard copy, online, or whatever else you need to do it on. In copy editing, there are style considerations. If the style of the author is not clear, you can go in and change it. Or if the author has not adhered to a style guide, you can go in and change it. Let's stick to the copy editing. There is a continuity and correctness. If the author has not kept to simple English, or has not kept to simple variants, and as the example of the weather being hot yesterday, that there were about 25 variants, if he has used 15 different variants for one thing, the editor will change that, has to change that. Rewriting for clarity. Sometimes we think we explain something, but really we don't. And it's only until somebody else reads it that they say, what exactly does he or she mean here? So these are all important things that an editor needs to look at. Grammar and usage. This is very important. Sometimes we want to simplify the grammar. An author may use a very complex way of putting a sentence in the grammar that for less educated people it may be actually very confusing. Copyright and fair use. If the author has written something regarding another author and another publication, and he doesn't have the right to do that, it is the editor's job to check this out. Also fact-checking. Now, I write a lot articles for Multilingual magazine, and when I first started writing, the editor of the magazine kept on asking me questions, and it was fact-checking questions. And in the beginning, I was a little insulted, saying, she doesn't believe me, what? But she was doing her job because it was something she didn't know. She had to check. And when she was not able to check on the internet herself, she was obliged to come back to me and say, where'd you get that information? And then I would be able to say, oh, so-and-so, who's a friend of mine, I asked him the question, he sent me an email, here's the email. So that's the kind of fact-checking sometimes editors have to do. Of course, now she stopped, thank goodness for that. Now, citations and references. Authors don't necessarily know how to write everything. I do remember, again, I used to write numbers with the whole word of the number, and she said to me, no, you only do that up to 5. Anything after that, or single numbers, anything after that you write the numerical number. I didn't know that. I wasn't a journalist. So there are all these information that is important for the editor to do. Now, the table of contents as well, because things change, so the editor is responsible for that. So in proofreading usually it refers for same language proofreading. It refers to proofing something that has been published or DTP'd before it gets actually to the public. So we have loose lines, we have double spaces between words, widows and orphans, end of line breaks, running heads, all of these things that, when a publisher, a typesetter does it, they don't necessarily know what goes where, so they presume and they just put the copy as it is. So the editor, the proofreader, has to come and correct all of these things so it reads well. So it's more mechanical. But between the two types of editing, we have certain things that are relevant for both. So consistency is number one. So whether you're proofreading a typeset document or whether you are copy editing, if something is not consistent, it is your job to point it out, mark it. You need to cross-reference. So if it says page 2, a copy editor in the unpublished, untypeset document will not know it. But once it's typeset and DTP'd, then that cross-reference of page 2 may have become page 3. So it is the proofreader that needs to cross-reference all of these things. Or if the document, if the actual text says the graph is further down under chapter so-and-so, and that chapter so-and-so has changed name because the copy editor changed it, it is the job of the proofreader to point it out. Capitalization is something that always goes wrong, and there's so many examples of capitalization problems. And of course, typos. They happen all the time. Now, this is for those that are more academic in the audience. There are two types of copy editing, whether it is same language or whether it is for another language. The mechanical and the substantive. So the mechanical is the process of making a text follow editorial or house style, keeping the preferred style and grammar rules. So mechanical is everything that is already part of governance, that they tell you this is the way you need to do it. So you mechanically check that all of these things that are prerequisites are part of the text. So some companies have to have special colors. Some companies will have the logo and the tagline. A tagline is the word we say underneath. So Nike's the logo, tagline is just do it. Okay? So some companies will have their tagline always in small letters. Some will want to have caps. So these are important stylistic things that a mechanical editing will check all of these things out. The substantive editing is also known as content editing. And now this word we know. It's to do with the actual text, the content of the text. What does it say? So here we're looking at structure. We're looking at the organization of ideas and concepts. Do they make sense? Do they follow a storyline? Are the arguments one building on the other, or are the concepts all over the place? Are there discrepancies and inconsistencies? Does the text say, in the beginning we're going to talk about ABC, but then we never talk about B? So these are the things that a substantive or content editing will be picking up. Yes. Thank you.
Previous slide, please. 这是在第一页的时候，有两个术语，一个是 editing， 另外一个是 proofreading。在我们中国，至少大陆这一边呢，很多时候都不会去区分 editing 和 proofreading， 都把它统称为校对。但是其实在美国的本地化行业里面 ，editing 呢它是叫审校 ，proofreading 叫审读。而且学生在摩托 A 高翻，他要完成自己的 practicum 的练习的时候呢，他需要一个 one editor, one proofreader。这个 editor 一般是 bilingual， 至少是他既懂你的易入语，又懂你的易出语的。但是 proofreader 很多时候呢，他就只是这个 target language 是他的母语。所以这个就是大家如果在阅读文献的时候，可以稍微的注意一下。刚才老师已经解释得很清楚了。还有一个，刚才老师提到了他公职的就撰文的这个杂志叫Multilingual。这个如果要投身到语言服务行业的话，要知道最新的动态的话，这个杂志是highly recommended， 你会知道 everything you need to know about the industry。在新生入学的时候，学校都会给一个免费的账号。然后每一期呢这个杂志会发到我们每一个人的邮箱里面。这是第二个我想要增加一下补充一点的。还有刚才说到的这个 mechanical editing 里面，老师提到的那个 preferred style。我不知道大家是怎么看这个 style 这个词。但是在美国有一本非常著名的书，是 E.B. White 和 William Strack 写的，叫 The Elements of Style。这个呢是一本很重要的书，但同时它也有 AP Style。像 BBC 的话，它有的 BBC Style Guidebook， 然后经济学人也有自己的 Style。举一个更国内的本地化的例子，大家如果看到新华社和中国日报都是国家的英文媒体，但是他们在标题上面其实遵循的是不同的 Style。一个呢是所有实词大写，另外一个只大写第一个单词的首字母，所以这就是基于他们不同的这个 style guidance、style book， 在呈现的这种体力的风格。所以这个在这个 mechanical editing 和substantive editing 其第二个是更倾向于我们昨天讨论的基于内容方面的。第一个呢，它就更像是比较机械的这种遵守循规蹈矩，遵从这个这个网站这个公司它自己的这些体力性的要求。好，就补充这点。
Thank you. So different people talk about different types of editing. So really, there are many categorizations, and if you search on the internet, you will find different types. Some people say there's 4 types, some people say there's 6, some people say there's 8. It doesn't matter. What we really need to know is that there's different types of editing. So we have, of course, the substantive editing, which is very important because it deals with the content, with the actual writing, what it is that we're trying to say or the author is trying to say. We have the developmental edit, which is looking at the big picture and fine-tuning issues. So that would be more or less, if it is an article within a book of articles, is this article relevant? Does it make the points that we want? As opposed to going in the nitty-gritty or the very detailed level of the article, it looks at the general picture. It's not always used, the developmental edit. Usually the developmental edit is done by the author themselves. They go over it and they correct things before they leave it. Copy editing is, again, the mechanics. It's a mechanical. Is it stylistically correct? We went through this extensively. Line editing is another word they use. Proofreading we covered, and style editing. These are all different words of saying the same thing. For us, for the purpose of this today, we're just going to stick to the 2 types of editing, mechanical and substantive or content. But I wanted you to be aware that other people may have different names for editing. So don't be confused. They're all boiling down to mechanical and content or substantive. There is nothing else. So, copy editing skills. Well, it takes a different skill set to edit. So first of all, the editor has to have a really good understanding and knowledge of the language. So if it is a same language editor, so let's say it's a Chinese author and a Chinese editor, well, that Chinese editor has to be a really great writer, him or herself, because how are they going to correct the language of the other author, right, without interfering with the text and the concepts and the ideas. So it's very important to have somebody who is trained and professional and knowledgeable in the language and in editing. So this person will have to have a broad knowledge because the author is the expert of the topic. Well, the editor can't be the expert of everything, but if he has or she has enough broad knowledge, they can generally, edit a text without interfering with the expertise of the author. They have to have critical thinking and judgment. Now, we know from our work as translators that one of the very important skills we have to have is critical thinking and judgment. So this is for me, it's number 1 in our lives. Everything we do, we have to have critical thinking and judgment. Also, excellent writing skills and style. How can you correct somebody else's style if your style isn't better? And better means that it's addressed to the audience, because your style may be very good as a journalist, but if you're writing a textbook for university students, that's not the right style. So really, you have to be flexible with your style. Then we have interpersonal skills. So you can see from the man here, yeah, I'm going to have to go ahead and disagree with you on that. There's always disagreements. There's always issues. How many of you have ever edited something that the translator or the person you edited for did not agree? I should have seen everybody's hand up on this one. Let me ask again, how many of you have edited and the translator that you edited did not agree with your edits? Okay, more hands. This is very normal because there are many subjective things that we edit. And the style sometimes is different. Of course, the more experienced the editor is, the more they will be able to overcome these issues and edit things that do not affect the style or do not affect something which is already correct. So it's not subjective. It's not their own idea of how it should be, but they stick to what the author has written. And attention to detail, every translator, editor, and post-editor will have to have. Ability to prioritize. This is one of my favorite topics when I talk about translation and the skills of translators and editors. There are some students and some people, some freelancers, that are so perfectionist in their attempt to give something so good that they may spend an hour on a sentence. Well, they have wasted an hour because an hour later they will not have more choices. The choices are the same. Within 5 minutes you know what your choices are. And if you can't pick up the right term within the first 5 minutes, then you're wasting your time. So prioritizing is very important. You have a problem, you look at your options, you prioritize, and you choose the best solution. And finally, I covered it already. Balance perfection versus timing. It's part of the same. So, copy editors, again, we're talking both for same language and other language translations, have to have some additional skills than authors or writers. So where do they come from? They come mostly from journalism or communications, especially if it's same language. Some of them, there are no certifications, by the way. And to become a copy editor is just a career path. So after you've got your degree in English, in writing, or in Chinese, for example, literature, you may choose the career of becoming a writer, a journalist, then you end up being a copy editor. Today, though, like everything, technology is taking over. So copy editors have their own tools. They have to design graphics, images, and web pages. So copy editors now have moved from text and hard copy and books and all manuscripts into working with web pages, graphics, infographics, and all the digital media that we have today. So they have to have a good, awareness of software and have technical skills. And finally, they need to be aware of SEO and audiovisual. It's moving so fast. I mean, just 5 years ago, video was not as important as it is today. In 10 years, we're not even going to be thinking of anything other than video. So things change drastically, and so does the skills of the editors. So we're going to talk now about translation editing specifically. So the first section was the broader, all the things that editors do. But now specifically, let's talk about translation and translation editing. So we know this a little bit better, most of us. So my favorite is garbage in, garbage out. As you can see, you can always debate, what is it? Is it the source language that's wrong, or is it my translation that's wrong? So, editing a translation, we have so many names for it. And to be honest, there are some differences, but they are so minute, most of them. So, revision. Yes, it is slightly different. You take a text and you revise it, you change it, Okay? You adapt it. Revision really means adaptation. Review. Okay, so you take a text, you look at it, and you review to make sure that it's correct. And if it's not, you point out what it is not correct and you change it. Checking. You take a text and you look through it to make sure that it's correct. Don't they all sound the same? Editing. You take a text, you look at it, and you make some changes to edit it to make it better. Transcreation. You take a text and you say, well, this text really doesn't work for my country. I get the concept, but I need to change it, especially if it's an idiom. I need to find the idiom for my country. Okay? But again, you're editing. Proofreading. You take a text and you look at it and you say, oh, there are things that need to be corrected here. Polishing. You take a text, you look at it and you say, I don't like the style very much. Let me just do a few little things to improve the style. Updating. You take a text and you say, this is a little old and out of date. Let me put the new information in. So yes, they're all slightly different, but in effect, they're all editing. So let's isolate the translator skills. This is not by far a full list of a translator's skills. It's not academic. I just pulled a few things together just to make a point that translators have some very, very special skills. So obviously a command of a pair of languages, not one. A copy editor only needs one language. A translator needs 2 languages. I just want to point out a few differences. So the broad general knowledge is not enough for a translator. A translator has to be specialized. Excellent writing skills and style, of course, but in both languages. Critical thinking and judgment, yes. And we all know that cognitively in our brains, they work differently from one language to the other. We need to do that in 2 different cultural settings. Interpersonal skills. Well, we talk with foreigners all the time, and we know how to be polite in many cultures, and that is a lot more than just one culture, one language. Able to prioritize. Well, yes, when you're translating, you have a lot more things to prioritize than when you're copy editing. Balance perfection versus timing. I went through this extensively. I think we all agree. Cultural intelligence. At the end of the day, a copy editor of the same language doesn't have to have cultural intelligence, but if we don't, then there's a problem in the work we do. Research skills. A copy editor for the same language only has one author. All they have to do is pick up the phone or send an email or a WeChat text and they'll get the answer. We can't. We have to have research skills. I'll give you an example. When I had a life sciences LSP, one of the jobs we were doing for a pharmaceutical company, SmithKline Beecham, way back then was we were translating the Genome Project. If you remember, the Genome Project was done by the US government, a couple of private companies, and then the European Parliament came in. And it was all funded that way. So every month, the Parliament members in the EU would meet in Strasbourg, and they had to have a briefing of the Genome Project. So one of the pharmaceuticals, who was a client of ours, undertook to do this briefing. So they would, once a month, they would give us a 6-page brochure. It was a time of DTP back then. And we did have email, but we still used faxes back then. They would give us a 6-page brochure of the most recent findings of the month. Then they would ask us to do translation, which would be done. We had set translators, the same translators, and it was a team of translators per language. It was only 6 pages, but we had 3 translators. And it would be done overnight. Then we had another team of 3 reviewers, again for each language. They would review overnight. Then we would do the desktop publishing. We would have then another set of proofreaders do the proofreading. So we started Thursday. Okay, so now we're at Saturday. We're doing the proofreading. We give it to the printer on Sunday morning. The printer prints it, and by Sunday afternoon, they transport it from the UK to Strasbourg, across the channel, all the way to Strasbourg. Monday morning, the brochure is at the seats of all the Parliament members when they're meeting. So this was going on for about a year. And the reason I'm sharing this story with you is that these translators, they were all excellent medical translators. Some of them were actually professionals with PhD for pharmacology and so on and so forth. But these terms, even for them, were unknown because they were just made up last week by their colleagues in the US. So they didn't even know what prompted them to make up those terms the way they did. But because science kind of uses their terminology in a specific way, they have a taxonomy that they follow, and it was kind of easy for them to figure out. Now, if these people were not experts, they would not be able to do it. But even so, they had to come up, not just the research skills, but the words that would make sense and would be the equivalent in the other languages. So I'm sharing that because the research skills are extremely important. And as I just said, if they already didn't know where to look and how to look and what to do, they couldn't have done this job the way it was. So hone in onto your research skills and your specializations, that's for sure. And of course we have technology. A good translator today has to have a lot of technology knowledge. Yeah.
刚才老师这一趴的讲述当中有2个术语，第一个是 DTP， 有同学，广外同学应该比较熟悉，就是 Desktop Publishing。在这里可以值得提的就是，有志要去联合国工作的同学，你要竞争口笔译的职位的话是非常 cutthroat。但是 DTP 因为它是个比较新的领域，而且它会结合你的管理技术和语言的技能。应该是从去年的招考当中就已经单列设出了 DTP， 包括去联合国下面的一些国际组织实习，他们这个也是有专门的职位的。另外一个老师刚刚提到的一个叫 GIGO，Garbage in and Garbage out， 这个原来是在计算机里面的一个术语。就是编过程的人都知道，如果你把一连串的 gibberish 的东西输进去的话，你的计算机给你的那个回应，也就是一串你自己都看不懂的东西出来。非常直接的理解就是你把垃圾放进去，你得到的也是垃圾。这个在翻译的行业里面经常是来说，原文的质量太差了，我只能翻成这个样子。所以这很多时候是翻译跟编辑在争执的时候的一个焦点。第一部分老师讲了其他的受到校对的一些方法，就除了我们说的 mechanical 和 substantive 之外的其他的，有很多的地方，很多的杂志或者是学者有不同的命名的方式，但是归根结底呢，仍然是我们老师刚才讲的这2种，所以就有一点像 you say potato, I say potato。所以希望大家有这个这个之前的一些认知。还有一个老师刚才提到的一个例子，有同学可能没有一个稍微有一点点术语的，就是 genome 那个词，就是基因组嘛，就讲到那些跟基因有关的东西，是上个星期才出来的术语。那幸亏这些翻译很多人是有医学博士的这些背景，但是仍然要做很多的这个检索，要做很多的准备。说到这个 research skills， 北外高翻就是我的母校有一个我不是高翻，我是音乐的，就是我们有一个老师叫李长栓老师，现在是院长还是副院长？他的一本书里面有专门的教你怎么用互联网和检索。然后在他比较新的一本书里面呢，我印象比较深刻的想跟大家分享的是一个例子，就是关于翻译的检索技能。 它非常的曲线救国，但是能够帮助你顺藤摸瓜。当时老师在书里面引用的一个例子就是说，迪奥有一句话，它是静音的翻译，说迪奥不是说迪奥，他说现在的这种 L型的裙子在市场上很受欢迎，就是廓形是 L 型的。那这个廓形你如果只查一个英汉字典、汉英字典的话，你得到了那个廓形剪影，它会给你的词是 silhouette。但是你反查的话，发现这个词跟服装设计完全不沾边。那如何找到这个廓形最准确的说法呢？老师就是非常曲线的方式去检索，这就是翻译的一个检索能力。他说，我首先去查中文的百科，知道首创的这个廓形上面做出风格很大的改变的，不是香奈儿，香奈儿是让女孩子穿裤子，是迪奥大师。然后我去找迪奥的英文的传记，找他的维基百科，发现在迪奥的这个词条里面出现了他设计的这个裙子有 A line， 有 H line。那么这个 line 是不是能够表示服装的廓形呢？再反查英文的字典 line 里面确实有这个廓形的意思。所以就是哪怕是很简单、没有那么术语的东西，这个 research skills 也是非常重要的。所以因为我不知道我师弟交给我的任务能不能完成，但是我想给大家分享的就是老师这个点，让我想到了在我的多年的翻译学习当中，其他的老师教过一些什么类通的东西，跟大家分享一下。
Thank you. So translation editing skills. Let's see what else do translator editors need. So they need all the skills of the writers, the translator, the copy editors, and of course, you know, the translators. Plus, they have to be confident, okay? You can't just pick somebody else's work and feel shaky about it. You know, you gotta feel that you know what you're doing. So confidence is one that is an important skill, and it comes with the ability of experience. The more experience you have with editing, the more confident you become. And that's how you become an expert. Also, great communication skills. When you can communicate verbally, you can also communicate in writing. And when you see somebody else's communication, you can kind of not judge it exactly, but you can figure it out a lot easier. So good communication skills are important for understanding what the author is trying to say, what the translator is trying to say, and how to maybe improve it, what is slightly wrong with it. Strong grammar and syntax, that goes without saying. Flexibility in writing styles, again, it's not just you writing here, you're taking somebody else's style, and you shouldn't be changing the style, you should be trying to help improve the understanding, the readability. Finally, you have to be a subject matter expert, as opposed to these same language editors that we said before, they need just a broad knowledge. Well, here the editor needs to be a subject expert, because how can you know all those details and if something is wrong unless you're an expert yourself? And then you need to be able to see the big picture. What is this document intended and its use? Who's going to read it? And you have to have time management. You can't spend more time editing a text than it would have taken you to translate it in the first place. So time management is always important. So what I'm showing you here is that the more we're going deeper into the tasks and the skill sets, we're seeing that there is we're growing in the amount of things that we need to become experts with. Are there any questions before we go into post-editing? Okay. No. Okay. So now we have technology. And technology, as we said, is a moving target. It changes. And that gives us a very big problem with post-editing, because we cannot put any rules. We cannot say that you always do this thing in post-editing. It is dependent on two things. The first thing is the language pair. Every language pair in the world has different outputs. We can't put any rules there. We can only make some rules per language pair. So when we speak about, Chinese into English, if we focus on that and we put all our energy and expertise and get trained on it, yes, we can put some rules here. We can start seeing some patterns that will help us do post-editing. But across the board of all languages, we cannot. The second reason why we can't put any rules across languages is technology. Technology is different. And if our machine engine is using rules-based, which is more grammatical, it's going to have a completely different output than all the other types of machine translation. And then by the time we do create some rules and some understanding and training, well, neural machine translation will be obsolete. There'll be something else coming out. So we have all this moving target around us, but nonetheless, we have some things, so don't despair. So, first of all, I want to share that there are some language pairs that are very similar. For example, Basque and Spanish. There are many examples like that. Those language pairs, if you put them through a rules-based, which is the oldest machine translation we have, it goes back 30, 40, 50 years, right? If you put them through that, you have 99, 100% perfect output. Now that is something that you should know. So there is an open source, and I haven't made a note of it, but I will spell it out for you. There is an open source project which is called Apertium. A-P-E-R-T-I-U-M. Apertium. And it's probably apertium.org. It's an open source project. It has 44 pairs. I don't think it has Chinese, but I could be wrong. The thing about open source is that it is a community-based project, which means that people contribute. And there must be something that, perhaps a Chinese community could do to contribute, to get attached with Apertium, to communicate. I know the people of Apertium. I can ask them how to make a community here, how to start. You may not want to start with Chinese into English. You may want to start with something which is a lot more similar and easier for the output, because it has to be rules-based. Apertium is only rules-based. And it is done by some academics, and one of them is Miquel Forcada. He is a professor of computer science in the University of Alicante in Spain. Actually, Catalan, if they had their way. And this has been going on for a good 15 years, I believe. So I wanted to share that you can have good output, but it really depends on the language. So Apertium is an example, and I'm pretty sure when we find it, we can put it on the WeChat. Then we have statistical machine translation, and most of the famous machine translation engines that we have, like Google and I think Baidu here, and Bing and the IBM Watson, okay, all of them started as statistical machine translation. I think actually I have it on the next, no. And they are based on getting a lot of information, and their output depends on how much information exists in a pair of languages. So if there is a lot of information translated for Spanish, then English and Spanish will have a better output of machine translation statistically, because there's a lot more information, numbers to crunch. But for Icelandic, for example, that there isn't that much, translated, it's very difficult to find parallel languages or texts that the same text is in English and the same text is in Icelandic. It's a very limited amount of text that is available. Therefore, that output is not going to be good at all. Okay? So that's how it works. And of course, with neural machine translation, what the scientists and the engineers are doing is they're saying to the computer certain algorithms that allow the computer to learn. So when the computer gets something wrong, it learns from that. Or when the computer gets something right, it learns from that. Now, I'm not an expert to explain the details for that. I hope there's going to be some more people later on explaining this. We're really talking now about post-editing. But unfortunately, post-editing is dependent on the output, and the output is dependent on what machine translation has been used. So far we have found out that if we just take any text and we put it in machine translation, and we hope that it's going to be good and we're going to post-edit it, we actually have to do heavy post-editing. So there are certain times that we know that we need to machine translate something, that it is worth us doing pre-editing. Now, we talked yesterday about controlled language. We talked about content optimization, right? That's all the same. So it's again for the same purpose. We take the original source and we create it in such a way that it's going to go through the machine more efficiently. That means, as we were shown by Rory yesterday with some of her examples, that idioms are not going to translate in a machine, right? So in pre-editing, you're going to take those out. You're going to change them. That way, you stand a better chance. Now, pre-editing is not something that the vast majority of the clients or the people who need to use machine translation are going to do. But it is a subject we need to address and be aware of, mostly because when we are writing something that will go through machine translation, we can write it in such a way, okay? So we need to start educating authors, because we're going to be the post-editors, and perhaps we have access to the authors, and then we can then share and educate them what it is that's going to come out if they put this instead of that. Now, there are many problems with machine translation. It would be great if we could all download a machine translation, configure it for ourselves, create our own engines, but we would need to be engineers. It is still very difficult. So most of the machine translation is open source, but even engineers wouldn't know how to configure it and customize it. So it's very, very specialized. There are integration challenges. So at the moment, if we want to use a machine translation with our tool, we can't do that. So it has to be done by the tool manufacturer, the tool provider. So let's say it's Trados. Trados will create that integration. It'll take Trados a year to add every engine because it takes time. It's not as easy. Of course, once you add one engine, you can add others. So at the moment, with some of the tools that we use, we have options of which machine translation to use. And most of them are cloud-based. So you just click a button. I want to use Google Translate. No, I want to use Watson, or I want to use, Bing. That's for us in the West. I'm sure you have the similar ones here that you can choose which machine translation you want to use. There is a great resistance by translators. We all know about that. And machine translation outputs are dependent on data. That's mostly for statistical, but that's the one that is more prominent and we have been using for a very long time. As I have already mentioned, that rules-based machine translation, statistical machine translation, and neural machine translation, you can see their acronyms there, RBMT, SMT, and NMT. They are completely different, their outputs, and every output is different from every engine for every language. So And then lastly, there is no specialized training available. We're now working on it. Now, the workflow used to be source text, target text, right? Very plain and simple. Now we have source text databases, not one database, many databases. Because what else do we have? We have machine translation. What else do we have? Translation memories. And what else? Terminology base, very good. Yes, any more? We have, we have plenty of databases, okay? And then the target text. So, whereas before it was a plain simple thing on our computer, you know, we were in control of the whole workflow, now we're not in control, okay? The source text goes in, and what comes out, we don't know what's going to come out. And that's what's been given to us to work on. So the databases. It can be a content management system, a translation management system. Now, you remember those two? We talked about them yesterday. Translation memory, you all know that. Glossaries, it can be digitized, but it could be a hard copy. It could be a book, your glossary. Terminology management, dictionaries. Dictionaries can be either offline on your computer or online. You could have, 15 different dictionaries. Some of them are subject. You may have resources that are online. Either the client has given them or he has given you access to their database of resources. And finally, the machine translation engine. So, again, academics will like this. There is a cognitive difference for translation and post-editing. So in translation, we generate something. So we generate possible solutions to what we are asked to translate, right? But in post-editing, we don't generate anything. We select between available solutions, what is the best, and we adapt it for target purposes. So cognitively, we do something different. And that's important to understand. We don't need to go into this. There are articles, academic articles. I have shared in the pre-workshop reading something like 6, 7, or 8, I can't remember exactly how many academic articles, and one of them refers to this. So what are the new skills we need to acquire? Well, we need to learn fast. And we need to understand the technology. What are the databases and what is the output from each database? How does it compare? So one of the great examples you can do is you can have different machine translations and take the same text and let it go through each of them and see what the output is, okay? And then you can try a different language and see what the output is. And if you can find a multilingual, for example, a multilingual website that will have the same paragraph in 5 languages, put it through 2 different machine translation engines, you'll have 5 times 2 outputs, all in Chinese. Compare all of that, see how it's different. Evaluate the suitability of the output in relation to brief and price, yes. So, this means that a post-editor is going to be asked to do something, and there will be a brief. I want you to do enough for me to understand what it is. And that's the difficult one, because if they say to you, I want you to post-edit perfectly as if it's publication, well, that's clear, okay? We all know what to do there. But when they say, I just want to understand, that's difficult because you need to use your judgment. Now, the reason they will say they want you only to post-edit is because they don't want you to spend time that they have to pay for, okay? So, you've got something to balance here. You're going to be paid so much, therefore you need to spend so much time, and you need to give them what they want without them coming saying to you, well, That's not what I wanted. So you need to balance that. You need to find exactly what is the brief, what is the client's level of understanding of what they want you to give them. You have to detect and correct errors, particularly punctuation and cohesion. Now that is the easy bit, because what happens is the more you practice, the more you know how to pick those things up, and those are the easy things to pick up. You have to conduct a stylistic revision, so you need to adopt certain things, right? Now, when we say stylistic, you don't want to have something which reads perfectly, but you want to have something that does not interfere with the understanding. So the key word is understanding. You'll need to collaborate with experts. A post-editor doesn't work alone. A post-editor needs to work with the engineers, with the people that has put it through the machine output. They have to work with the project managers, maybe the product managers if they're part of the bigger client. It's a whole team of people they work with. Finally, it has to be as somebody who's methodical and organized, somebody whose mind can actually start looking at patterns and understanding patterns, and then going straight for that. And that's what an organized and methodical mind does. And you have to follow instructions. If they say to you, do a light PE, meaning just give me the understanding, well, don't spend 3 hours giving them a perfect language, because that's not what they wanted, and they're not going to pay you for that. So what is light post-editing and what is full post-editing? So let's start with the full post-editing, which is self-explanatory. It involves a great level of intervention to the output to make it understandable, stylistically appropriate, and can be used for publishing. So other people, the general public, can understand it. Okay, that's the easy bit. Okay, you don't have to make it perfect as long as it's correct. The light P, however, depends on the interpretation of each client. So they want minimal intervention because they don't want you to spend time. You could be their employee, so they're going to pay you anyway, so it's not a financial issue, but it's a time issue. They don't want you to spend time. Because at the end of the day, the purpose of that particular translation is not very important for the company. And that could potentially be something which is an email from, one employee to another. They just want to get the gist of it. So you just want to make sure it's correct, okay? And especially if something is urgent. Again, they don't want, any fantastic style. They just want to get, what is this person talking? Is this a problem? Will I have to go to court in this country? That's what they want to get. So I said to you before that it's extremely difficult to create rules. Yet, there are some things that we want to do, and we can keep in mind that this is a way that we can work for post-editing. So of course we want to fix any wrong terms. That's important even for the light PE. If it's something especially technical, you want to make sure that it's correct. We want to fix syntax. Syntax is important to fix because then there's no readability, no understanding. If the syntax is incorrect, the sentence doesn't make sense. We want to correct the structure of the phrase. That's again part of syntax. Or the order of the words. They will come out completely differently if it's a language combination with German, for example. We want to correct some of the numbers, genders, cases, uppercase, lowercase, tenses. That sometimes these come out wrong because the noun came out wrong, so the tense is going to come out wrong. So we need to correct some of these things. A lot of the times there's going to be missing text. The machine didn't understand something, ignored it. So there isn't even a gap in the sentence, but the text is completely missing. And if you don't put that in, then your sentence doesn't make sense. Okay? And finally, you want to correct misspelling and punctuations. Those are the general rules that you want to follow. Now, a lot of translators who, resist post-editing have good, valid reasons. However, machine translation is here to stay, and engineers are trying their best to improve the output, and the output does improve. And the more feedback we give, the better it will become. Now, the good thing about post-editing that translators are starting only now to understand is that post-editing is not their enemy coming from the client, asking them to do something cheaper and quicker, but could be their friend if they use machine translation and then they post-edit. They actually do a lot more work. So they increase their productivity. Okay? Now, I know people that 2 decades ago would translate anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 words in a conventional way. Okay? And when I say conventional way, the one person I knew that would translate 10,000 words a day, and it was all medical words, was an expert, of course. She would dictate. And she had a typist. She did 10,000 words a day, And that was decades ago. Can you imagine what she would be doing with post-editing? Take it as a friend, consider it as a friend, and start using it to your benefit. Okay, let's change things around. Let's make it our choice that we are using this, and instead of translating 1,000 words over a period of 2 or 3, 4 hours, whatever it takes everyone, we're going to do it in an hour because it's going to be so much simpler, okay? So if we change our attitude, we can make this to our advantage. Post-editing skills increase with time and practice. So it takes about 100 hours, 100,000 words to post-edit to feel comfortable in your language pair. So if you were to work every day for a full month, that's about 100,000 words. Okay, so that's not possible. So let's say a few months. But in a few months' time, you will have learned from the specific machine translation you're using and for the specific language pair you're using, you will have learned all the patterns, and you will be really quick to know where the mistakes are, correct them, and then boom, your productivity is going to go sky high. Okay? I think this brings us to the end. Any questions?